In our last lesson, we looked at dividing fractions, and in today's lesson, we're going to look at dividing decimals. And there are a couple of different cases we're going to look at. The first case is when your divisor is a whole number. And so if we look at this problem right here, we have 20 8/10 divided by -16. This number that's on the outside right here, this is called the divisor. The number that's getting divided is called the dividend. We will always want to have a whole number divisor. When you're dividing by a whole number, the decimal simply moves straight up into the answer. The decimal from the dividend is going to go straight up into the answer. The toughest part about dividing with decimals is understanding where that decimal point has to go. So if this number, this divisor, is a whole number, well then this decimal point is just going to move straight up. Okay, so that's where the decimal point is going to go in this example. Okay, so when we're doing our divisions, we need to make sure not only that we know our facts, but we also have to make sure that we line everything up nicely here. Okay, this is where our decimal is going to go, and now we have to make sure we put our numbers in the correct spot as well. Now, I have a positive number. I'm dividing by a negative. I know my answer is going to be negative, so I'll just worry about that negative sign at the end. For now, I'm just going to focus on the numbers. 16 doesn't go into 2, but it will go into 20 one time. So above the 0 in the 20, I'm going to put my 1. Okay, so I know I'm going to have 1 and something here. Now I'm going to multiply 1 by 16, that's 16. And when I subtract, 20 minus 16 is 4. And now I bring the 8 straight down. And now I've got to figure out how many times is 16 going to go into 48. And so if I do my multiplication facts here, well, 16 times 1 is 16, 16 times 2 is 32, 16 times 3 is 48. So above this 8 in the dividend, I'm going to put my 3. And now I know 3 times 16 is 48. And I subtract, and I've got a 0 remainder, and now I'm done. Okay, and now, again, I just have to apply my negative symbol. A positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative number. And so my answer is -1 3/10. Okay, so if you divide by a whole number, just take the decimal from the dividend and move it straight up into the answer. In the last example, we divided by a whole number divisor, and so now we're going to look at when the divisor is a decimal, like in this example right here. Okay, I can see right here that my divisor is 8/100. This is not a whole number. And so what I want to do, I want to change my decimal divisor into a whole number. The way that I'm going to do this is by taking the decimal point and moving it once, twice to the right. Okay? If I move this decimal twice to the right, now this is the whole number 8. Okay? Now, if I move the decimal point 2 times to the right on my divisor, I have to do the same thing to the decimal in my dividend. And so I'm going to move it once, twice, and this is where the decimal is going to go, and I'm going to move it straight up into my answer. Okay, so if I think about this, I'm technically doing now 50 56/100 divided by 8. Okay, and so I've got where my decimal is going to go. I have a positive number being divided by a positive number, so I know my answer is going to be positive. And now I'm just going to do my division. Okay, so 8 goes into 5 0 times, but it goes into 50 6 times. So I put my 6 above the 0. Again, line everything up nicely. 6 times 8 is 48. When we subtract, we're left with 2. Bring the 5 straight down. And now let's figure out 8 into 25. Well, 8 goes into 25 3 times. So above this 5, I'm going to put my 3. Okay, so notice the decimal point's in between the 6 and the 3. 8 times 3 is 24. I subtract, I'm left with 1, and now I've got to bring the 6 straight down. 8 into 16. Well, I know that 8 goes into 16 twice. So above this 6, I'm putting the 2. 8 times 2 is 16. I subtract, and there's my 0 remainder, so I'm finished. And now I can see my answer is 6 32/100. In the third example, again, my divisor is not whole. This is 1 2/10. I want to make my divisor a whole number, so all I need to do is move my decimal point 1 place to the right. Now my divisor is 12. Since I moved the decimal one place to the right on my divisor, I'll do the same thing on my dividend. And this is where the decimal goes in my answer. I bring it straight up. Okay, so now I have negative 40 and 32 hundredths divided by 12. And I'll worry about the signs later on. I'm just focused on the division at this point. 12 doesn't go into 4, so I'm not going to put anything above it. But 12 goes into 40 3 times. So I'll put my 3 above the 0. 3 times 12 is 36. When I subtract, I'm left with 4. And I'm going to bring the 3 straight down. Okay, so now I've got to figure out how many times 12 goes into 43. Well, I just did 12 times 3 to get 36, and I can't get much closer than that with the 43. So above this 3, I'm going to put another 3. 12 goes into 43 3 times. And again, 12 times 3 is 36. I do my subtraction. I'm left with a 7. And I'm bringing the 2 straight down. Okay, so now I've got to figure out how many times is 12 going to go into 42. Or excuse me, into 72. So 12 times 3 I know is 36. 12 times 4 is 48. 12 times 5 is 60. 12 times 6 is 72. So I'll put my 6 above this 2. Again, line everything up nicely. 12 times 6 is 72. I subtract, there's my 0 remainder. And now I just have to remember that a negative divided by a positive number is going to be a negative number. So we have negative 3 and 36 hundredths. In the fourth example, I'm dividing 8 by 1 and 1/10. And again, my divisor here is not a whole number, so I need to make it a whole number. I'm going to have to move the decimal point one place to the right. And that means I'm going to have to do the same thing on my dividend. Okay, well, 8, the decimal point's right there. And so if I move it one place to the right like that, I have an empty space that I'm going to have to fill in with a 0. And now this is where the decimal goes, and it goes straight up into the answer. And I'm technically just doing 80 divided by 11. And so if I do my division, I know that 11 will go into 80 7 times. 7 times 11 is 77. When I subtract, I'm left with 3. All right, my remainder is not 0, so on the inside, all right, on the right-hand side of the decimal, I'm going to have to add a 0 and bring it straight down. And now I have to figure out how many times 11 goes into 30. Well, 11 is going to go into 30 twice. 2 times 11 is 22. When I subtract, I'm left with 8. Again, that's not a 0 remainder, so I'll add a 0 on the inside and bring it down. 11 goes into 87 times. All right, again, make sure you're lining everything up nicely. 7 times 11 is 77. I subtract, I'm left with 3. I add a 0. I already brought it down. Okay, and now I have 11 into 30. 11 goes into 30 twice. That's 22. When I subtract, I'm left with 8. Add a 0, bring it down. 11 goes into 87 times, and I think we can tell what's happening here. Okay, in this case, we kept adding zeros. We found we've got a pattern. We have a repeating decimal. And so we're going to have to write our answer using the repeated bar notation. Okay, so if I look at my number up here, it starts to repeat after the hundredths place. 2 7, and then I have another 2 7, and then if I kept going, I'd have another 2 7. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to write 7 and 27 hundredths. Okay, and then I'm going to have to put the bar over the 2 and the 7 since they both repeat. So like this right here, and that's going to be the answer to our problem. 7 and 27 hundredths repeated. In some examples that we do, we might be asked to round our answer to a certain place value, and so that's what we're going to practice doing here. Okay, in some cases when we're dealing with money, they might want us to round it to the nearest cent or to the nearest penny. It's important to realize that when they're talking about money, all right, especially to the nearest penny, they're talking about to the hundredths place. Okay, so we're going to have to practice rounding to the hundredths place. In my last two examples, I can see here they want it to the hundredths place, here they want their answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, but let's focus on number 5 where they want us to round it to the nearest cent. All right, I have 8 35 hundredths divided by 2 6 tenths. So it's like $8.35 divided by 2 6 tenths. My divisor's not whole, so I'm going to move my decimal one place to the right. I'll do it on the dividend as well. And this is where the decimal comes straight up into the answer. And now I'm going to go ahead and do my division. All right, 26 goes into 83 3 times. Okay, so I put my 3 above this 3. 3 times 26 is 78. When I do my subtraction, 83 minus 78 is 5. And now I bring this 5 straight down. Okay, so now I've got to figure out how many times 26 goes into 55. Well, 26 times 3 was 78. That's too much, so let's try a 2. I put my 2 above that 5. 2 times 26 is 52. And so I'll subtract. I'm left with 3. That's not a 0 remainder, so on the inside I'll add a 0 and I will bring it straight down. And now I've got to figure out how many times 26 goes into 30. Well, 26 goes into 30 one time. 1 times 26 is 26. I subtract and I'm left with a 4. Now, the question said round your answer to the nearest cent. And for cents, again, that is the hundredths place. And so I look at my work right now and I can see I've got 3 and 21 hundredths. But I'm not sure if I'm going to have to round up my answer or round down my answer because I haven't looked at what the thousandths place is. If they ever want you to round it to the nearest hundredth, you need to know what the next place value, the thousandths place, is going to be to help you figure out if you're rounding up or down. So I'm going to do this division one more time. I'll add a 0. I'll bring it down. And now I have to figure out 26 into 40. Well, 26 times 2 when we did that was 52. That's too much, so it's only going to be one time. 1 times 26 is 26, which leaves us with 14. Now I can round my answer to the nearest hundredth. Okay, 3 and 211 thousandths. Well, that's like 21 hundredths. And when I look at the thousandths place, this is only a 1, which is going to round us down. Okay, so I'm going to use the approximate symbol, which is kind of like a squiggly equal sign like that. This number is approximately 3 and 21 hundredths. So again, if we're thinking about this to the nearest cent, that's like $3.21. Example 6, again, I'm rounding it to the nearest penny, which again is our hundredths place. So I'm going to move my decimal one place to the right on my divisor. So I'm going to do it one time with my dividend and bring the decimal straight up. And now I'm going to go ahead and do my division. 32 only goes into 61 once. So then we have 61 minus 32. That subtraction is going to leave us with 29. And I bring down this 5. And now I've got to figure out how many times 32 goes into 295. Well, I know that that's going to go in 9 times. 32 times 9 is 288. When you subtract 295 by 288, that leaves you with 7. Okay. I need to go down to at least the thousandths place in order to round to the hundredths place, so I need to keep going. I'm going to add a 0 and bring it down. 32 goes into 70 2 times. 2 times 32 is 64, leaving us with 6. And again, I've got my hundredths place, but I need to know what the next place value is to know if I'm going to round up or down. So I'll do one more 0 and bring it down. 32 only goes into 60 once. And so again, that's 32. That leaves me with 28. And I can now figure out that this is going to be approximately 1 and 92 hundredths. We have 92 hundredths. 1 in the thousandths place is not enough to round us up to 93 hundredths. So again, for money, we can think of this as $1.92.